This video is sponsored by Knuckles0x, Baba Snake, Julio the Boy, and Obito, who requested this topic. If you'd like to directly support my content, as well as catch it early, have your name credited as a sponsor, or maybe even have your what if ideas produced as commissions, consider visiting the links to my Patreon and such in the description below. With the prior two routes done, it's now time to shift our attention to how the Shadow Clone training method could possibly interact with and affect Sasuke Uchiha. Full disclosure, the way we go about this third route doesn't necessarily matter all that much, as with Sasuke being the other main character of the series, we're kinda spoiled for choice of places in the timeline he could implement different methods of training. For example, Sasuke picking up use of Shadow Clones and using them for training around the time Naruto in this universe learns it with say Jiraiya during his summoning or Sharingan training, still being way earlier than in canon. Simultaneously, we could simply call this exploration of Sasuke being the one to clock Naruto using it during the tree climbing training, as we established with Sakura last time, all the whole demon wind bomb technique portion of the conversation, since that could just save a great deal of time. Another one just as good though is pre the Chunin exam finals training, since he's literally training with the guy who invented the method for Naruto in canon. So if Kakashi chose to help Sasuke be more versatile rather than just teach him Chidori, that could be a method or even just a way to get Chidori faster, and some other benefits both intended and unintended. In the end though, all these options present different fun ways for Sasuke to break the story the same way we've just done with Sakura and Naruto. The truly most interesting thing to address before we really get into the topic of Sasuke and clone training though, is how the Sharingan can affect a person's training and growth in Naruto, as one of my favorite comments from last part was that very idea and speculation. Looking at the feats of characters like Kakashi, Sasuke, Itachi, and Madara, and what they're capable of just because of their intellect and cunning playing very well with their ability to keenly observe and copy the techniques of others alone. It most certainly shouldn't be over or understated how useful just a regular Sharingan can be for a ninja, due to both the precog and the copying, since outside of combat, it's a perfect ability for espionage and intelligence gathering as well. Even so, I think the Sharingan itself and any training methods around it still kinda pale in comparison to what can be done with Shadow Clone training, especially when it's performed at its highest ranks. However, both have certain levels to them, as in my opinion, the Sharingan is never really used to its full extent for growth and training the way it could have been. To illustrate this a bit quicker than I've been gushing on these kinds of topics so far in this series, the prescience method utilized by Kashin Koji and Boruto could theoretically be somewhat approximated by a jutsu like the Tsukuyomi. Of course, this is a fairly taxing jutsu on any Uchiha, but the fact that it dilates time and can even expose someone to extremely vivid illusions of alternate timelines and realms means that one probably could use it for some means of, say, image or concept training, such as we've seen in other battle manga like Dragon Ball. However, typically, the Sharingan's power is specified in its precognitive abilities and its copy abilities, which either aren't always 100% useful or aren't always utilized to their full extent, since in most fights, you will usually only have a chance to use a couple of jutsu rather than say 1,000 plus for example, meaning a massive library of techniques like Kakashi has is better for increasing the versatility of a ninja rather than outright their strength alone. As again, I don't believe this is 100% the best way to use the Sharingan in training. It is a good use of it, but not the highest realms one could go. Even so, this concept of the Sharingan's basic uses for increasing the prowess of a ninja still helps to strengthen my position on just how broken Shadow Clone training is alone, and especially how broken it could be on other characters, as when considering characters like Sasuke and Kakashi, this now opens the ability to mix the use of the Shadow Clones and the Sharingan in one's training, which as we will get into further later on, could be extremely useful and game-breaking on its own right. Saving time with the tree walking exercise route, we will continue viewing just how differently things could get simply with the use of Shadow Clones during the chakra control training done for the rematch with Zabuza and Haku, as this is also where Sasuke gets full control of his Sharingan for the first time, and begins to have some use of it. And once again with this setup, as I've said twice before, you would probably change the entire story of Naruto, since I think directly after the Land of Waves, your Naruto and Sasuke here would be a bit too strong for the plot to occur as it did in canon. Just looking at his own abilities on the source material, Sasuke increased the efficiency of his use of chakra enough to be praised by Zabuza and Haku during this fight, and even pulled off techniques like a simple body flicker for example, adding it to his repertoire, which for a Genin is already noted to be rather impressive across his above average taijutsu, ninjutsu, bukijutsu, and affinity for stuff like strategy and assassination techniques. Though just like we spoke about with the version of Naruto at this point, being able to multiply the magnitude and mastery of his current skill, even a small bit, could very easily open some interesting routes for Sasuke as well. For example, he would also be capable of doing everything I suggested Naruto could with the Demon Wind Bomb jutsu, just flat out. Or better yet for this situation, addition, the body flicker he debuts against Haku could be evolved a bit further, since taking on Haku is after all a battle of speed, and increasing the control of chakra makes the effectiveness of basic techniques like the body flicker way better. On top of this, Sasuke does remember Shisui and what he was famous for, as he had witnessed he and Itachi train a few times. Thus, if Sasuke were to, as I argued for Sakura on a low ball, simply double the experience gains of his chakra control training, he could likely weigh more than double the effectiveness of things like his body flicker, making it more efficient on chakra use, and thus capable to be mixed or comboed with other techniques that pull on the chakra. And by that measure, Sasuke is already familiar with the changes in chakra nature by this point, which would now also get better and stronger due to his chakra control. So as I hinted at last time, it opens the conversation of what could be done when adding changes in chakra nature to purely physical techniques. Ultimately, the major benefit of all of this would be that fire style jutsu themselves will likely be a lot more effective and consistent across the series, and especially when used by Sasuke. But overall, what do you think happens if someone were to change the nature of the chakra they used to amp themselves with? For example, what would a fire style body flicker jutsu be like? The simple conclusion is that it's a body flicker done through the medium of flame, and thus is capable of more easily drawing attention while the shinobi moves away, or even maybe lightly burning the target like an attack. I could even see a jutsu like this having an effect that leaves a bit of fire or sparks and embers behind in a trail to disincentivize enemies from following after the caster. That would cut into the jutsu's stealth abilities, but would simultaneously increase its use in combat, and it could always be used for misdirection. Or as posed earlier, what happens if you make the chakra you are enhancing your physical movements with, like your taijutsu, change in its nature, for example? Could Sasuke pull off something like a fire punch, or even just generate significant amounts of heat so his intercepting fist taijutsu does a bit of extra damage, for example, when countering or catching enemy attacks? Going with my idea posed last time of yin release taijutsu making feint and fake attacks easier, could Sasuke not theoretically generate enough heat to cause mirages and mirror that effect, mixing yin and fire release into your physical attacks to make a kind of shimmering mirage fist changing chakra nature plus taijutsu style? Even if all Sasuke could manage is a rudimentary version of something like Shisui and Itachi's Uchiha style halo dance, for example, Sasuke would still be placing himself at this point way ahead of his canon counterpart, and better yet, would already be naturally loading himself out with a great deal of techniques that would be extremely useful both against Haku and Zabuza, but also just further down the line, and especially against other Uchiha, which would be very enticing to Sasuke. And this is all before he starts using his Sharingan, really. It should also be mentioned that like with Sakura, even a single shadow clone could be pretty crucial for Sasuke in melee or close quarters combat situations, since he very often gets overwhelmed, especially in earlier parts of the story. It might be a little silly and out of reach for him currently, but with his genius, enough chakra, and control, Sasuke could in essence become a master of pack tactics, second likely to only Naruto. Like imagine him rolling up on Itachi with say 20 versions of himself, and while they're not as strong as the original, there's certainly something to be said for the kind of chaos 20 Sasuke is with all 5 releases each could bring to the battlefield, while he could also increase and decrease the number of clones on the field to meet his strength needs versus the swarm/diversionary needs, since those could be any kind of clone from earth to fire, lightning, etc., also allowing Sasuke to manipulate the battlefield and its conditions in countless different ways. And thus, the snowball begins to roll again, since now this means that Sasuke would do better in the bridge fight, and thus would stay conscious longer, allowing him to observe more of the battle with his newly awakened Sharingan, which therefore means a chance to copy any and all jutsu or techniques displayed by Zabuza, Haku, or even Kakashi during the fight. One of the biggest pickups from this would obviously be witnessing more of Haku's moves, even though his Kekkei Genkai means the vast majority of them can't be directly copied or adapted simply. Regardless, this would still be pretty big, as even something as small as picking up single-handed jutsu weaving early could be massive for Sasuke. And beyond that, Zabuza has no Kekkei Genkai, and many of his kenjutsu and assassination techniques would be wildly useful for Sasuke, even if some of them would require a change in nature to water to directly use them. Things such as the silent killing would still be a perfect pickup though, and this also brings up the true way to make training with the Sharingan, and especially doing so with clones, truly broken, using the time dilation and copy ability to adapt a jutsu you otherwise couldn't use into ones you can use. For instance, as it is, Sasuke couldn't use Zabuza's hidden miss jutsu plus silent killing combination, because even if he copied both techniques, he could only pull off the one that doesn't require water release until he learns the change in nature to water. That said, if he perfectly understands the mechanics behind the jutsu, and what its components, form, and the amount of chakra needed, and what the end goal is, then theoretically at least, it should be possible to copy the vast majority of ninjutsu, and then adapt them to be done in a way you can do so, even if you say you don't have all 5 chakra releases or a Kekkei Genkai. Continue with the hidden miss silent killing technique, that wouldn't work sure, but if you still pull off the Kenjutsu, stealth, and assassination techniques, but find something else to hide in than miss, such as smoke and fire, then the jutsu would still work, the major differences being mildly different secondary effects and a slightly altered method to perform it. And this is exactly what we see with Madara's fire style hiding in ash and dust technique, which is virtually the same thing, just fiery, so you would assume it's possible for the jutsu to burn or hurt the target with smoke inhalation, rather than say the effect of the hidden miss style doing things like making you more susceptible to damage by lightning chakra, or making it harder to keep a grip on your weapon or solid stance to the ground you're holding. And what's better, this could likely be replicated with say a sand or dust storm, thunderstorm, or tornado to hide in, when using the jutsu with earth, lightning, or wind release. So before we even have the conversation of stuff like novel Sasuke eventually having the feat of figuring out how to mimic the effects of Kekkei Genkai by very precisely using the separate chakra natures that make them up, we need to first think about stuff like Sasuke copying the seemingly unusable jutsu of ice release, and then through the use of the Sharingan and the brokenness that is clone training, saying, nah, I'll snag that and find a way to use it myself. Like Haku's 1000 flying ice/water needles of death jutsu could just be twisted into a fire style technique, and then Sasuke could use it in the exact same way pretty much. The difference just being that fire is far harder to condense enough to impale an enemy with it like ice is, at least until you unlock the Mangekyo and the black flames of Amaterasu. Or even crazier, trying to literally mirror concepts like the demonic ice mirror jutsu, which could be extremely tricky, but theoretically not at all impossible. And if Sasuke did pick it up, it'd be a major boon to his arsenal. Like reconsider my idea of using the heat of fire release to make mirages, and possibly mix that in with the Genjutsu style clone, or simply Genjutsu itself in general, as well as maybe the use of a shadow clone or two and the body flicker jutsu. Mixing those techniques together with very careful chakra control could pretty much directly adapt Haku's signature jutsu, and the events of watching more of the battle with Haku and Naruto, and later Zabuza, instead of being unconscious for the latter half of it, could push Sasuke to try to increase his physical stamina, strength, and speed, with the hopes of matching or surpassing the true hidden power of Haku, since he got to see far more of it, which Naruto would also likely attempt to do so as well in this timeline, meaning Sasuke could reasonably be faster than in canon and also boasting a new repertoire of custom fire style jutsu and weapon techniques or buki jutsu, all born from the ice release and assassination mastery of Haku and Zabuza, and all before we even get into the Chunin exams, thus making the exams far easier for Sasuke and giving him more power to work with before he begins training again. Speaking of the exams, like I mentioned with Sakura, it's possible this Sasuke will be difficult to either get the curse mark on, or at least to attempt him with its power, since if he can trap Orochimaru in a demonic heat mirage dome, and hold him off for the clone or something, it's highly possible Team 7 could simply retreat, or even steal Orochimaru's scroll before doing so, and proceeding to complete the Forest of Death. Then Sasuke would have an easier time in his prelim battle, because he'd be able to use jutsu and he'd be stronger, forcing him to exert himself far less to get a spot in the finals, and now setting himself up with a month of training he can directly multiply, just as I insinuated with Naruto and Sakura, and we're already asserting him as a bootleg version of Haku, who could be very comparable due to trying to adapt his jutsu, and because of no curse mark, now he would have witnessed more techniques by the other preliminary fighters, and he could then begin attempting to adapt those as well, which somehow sounds more disgusting than the idea of Sasuke using silent killing in a version of hidden miss jutsu. Just to name off a few, he could still very likely devise his Lion's Barrage Taijutsu, even if he isn't forced to not use his ninjutsu against Yoroi and his chakra absorption jutsu, since Kiba and Naruto's fight would likely still be very taijutsu focused, and could still result in a version of the Uzumaki Barrage being debuted more than likely. If nothing else, at least we'd see a clone body slam here. Or Sasuke could snag concepts from Kiba and the Inuzuka, since his main target at the time is Itachi, meaning there is more incentive to learn ways of fighting and perceiving things that don't rely on his sight. Thus, copying the Inuzuka's chakra enhancement of the sense of smell is completely sound for the quest to get revenge against Itachi. By the way, this idea also brings up the fact that the Sharingan could also be used against Yoroi to precog his movements and make the fight against him easier, which would in turn mean that Yoroi's chakra absorption jutsu could be copied by Sasuke's Sharingan, which alone as a concept is extremely crazy, as it would mean that Sasuke can just basically use either Samihara or the Predator Path in one of his hands, or maybe even through his weapons, since with his Sharingan he can literally see the flow of chakra better than Yoroi can, so he'd be way better at using the jutsu than he ever was, aside from the fact that he is just unfathomably stronger than him. That alone is fairly game breaking, even before we get into ideas like watching and adapting other things you're getting to witness, like the clan techniques of the Ino Shikacho trio for example, since the Nara clan abilities of using the mental energies of Yin release to manipulate shadows would mix extremely well with the Uchiha's fire style, as one of the weaknesses of the Nara's shadow techniques are that they can't be done in complete darkness, but that's not an issue if you can generate your own light sources like flames. Beyond that, Yamanaka's skills will be extremely useful when adapted to Uchiha-style yin-release techniques, and if nothing else, generating giant limbs like fists or golems of flame or lightning in order to mimic Akimishi techniques is not only wicked sick, but also good practice to eventually wield a Susanoo, especially since most Sharingan wielders never get a Mangekyo, thus presenting a Mangekyo safe substitute that doesn't endanger the eyes. I will also admit that I'm rather partial to this kind of setup with Nara and Uchiha abilities specifically, since if you've seen my Hinata on Team 7 What If, where Sasuke finds power in the Shinigami for example rather than Orochimaru, then you probably get where I'm going with this, as that idea and build of Sasuke even directly informed an NPC I made for my Naruto D&D campaign, being a kind of ninja version of the Grim Reaper, whose lineage is partially Nara clan for use of the shadows, and partially Kaguya clan for the use of the macabre stuff or stuff like bones and death, in conjunction with fire and earth release for that feeling of the unstoppable otherworldly fire and brimstone ninja. Aside from this, Sasuke could also witness the use of the 8 gates and Gaara's sand defense, or even 2 drastically different styles and takes of using Hyuga's gentle fist style Taijutsu, which is just a technique that utilizes changes in chakra form and sometimes nature in conjunction with the use of Taijutsu techniques, and even Kekkei Genkai. So all that stuff about like fire style body flicker and stuff like that, Sasuke can now get way better at it by just watching Neji. Or just imagine mixing the intercepting fist with the gentle fist to make a style of Taijutsu that is perfectly suited to counter other Taijutsus and also wear down the opponent through systematically attacking their chakra points. There's also the technique shown off by Tenten and Tamari that can be usefully snagged and twisted by Sasuke as well, or even the techniques used by the Sound Team. However, many of them took either special tools or even in the case of Zaku, surgical intervention to replicate. Still, again with the Sharingan mixed with Shadow Clone training method, nothing has to be directly copied, just adapted in a way that Sasuke could use it, which he likely could come to do in some way or another since these are all just sound-based techniques for the most part, and that's not extremely impossible to replicate. Beyond this, because Sasuke would be pushing himself and his chakra reserves a lot more, he'd have far more chakra than in canon to utilize and continue growing stronger with a lot earlier. In fact, he'd be able to pick up his change to lightning nature a lot sooner and possibly even pick up more than just that, such as his Chidori variants for sure, or hell, maybe even his Kirin Jutsu extremely early on the timeline. To that extent, as we discussed with Naruto, Sasuke could also invent more jutsu like Kirin, such as a fire style version, as he presumably just needs to cause a forest fire to make use of it. That is to say, it really is a crazy amount of strength he could gain in a short time. In fact, still lowballing him, Sasuke would now have at least 2 months compared to the regular one for his Chunin exams training, allowing him to learn stuff on top of the Chidori, and further improving his physical abilities and Taijutsu skill to match Rock Lee's, and likely his speed to match Haku's, since now he could steal anyone's back he's just witnessed and could keep going on and advancing further since like with the Sakura route, his odds of leaving the village dropped drastically low in this timeline, as I doubt this version of Sasuke would be so devastatingly embarrassed by Itachi's return or set off by Naruto's growth since he'd understand it a bit more and will be growing rather comparably as well. Maybe even doing well enough that when Itachi and Kisame reappear, he doesn't need healing by Tsunade, and instead accompanies Naruto and Jiraiya to find her, making that task easier and still giving Sasuke a form of training under Asani. However, this route of the story likely wouldn't differ in ways that are all too significantly different from my What If Naruto Won Early Super Mini, which if you've enjoyed this series so far, you should probably go check that out as well after this, since you'll probably enjoy that too. To continue expanding into how quickly and how strong Sasuke would get using only a couple of clones during his training, by the time we move into the Shippuden era, he would theoretically have even more chakra than his canon counterparts, more than likely enough for far more than a single clone, meaning he could now be more than doubling his gains. Even if we go with the idea that I personally disagree with by some fans, which is that Sasuke at his strongest by the Boruto era only has enough chakra for 10 clones or so, that's actually more than enough to make Sasuke a literal god, since like I said, that virtually turns the time skip from 2.5 years into a 25-year time skip, making it more than reasonably possible for characters in the Shippuden era to far surpass their canon counterparts and strongest versions of themselves that we've seen in the Boruto era. And keep in mind that Sasuke spent most of that time in canon traveling and exploring more of the ninja world, experiencing and witnessing more with his Sharingan, which led to his further growth. So how would a concept like that interact with Shadow Clone training? Since I've discussed how I don't want to step into the realm of another Super Mini, but by this point, Sasuke could just as easily spend his time skip with Naruto and Jiraiya, traveling the world and training. Meaning here, both reincarnations of Indra and Ashura would benefit from the passive use of each other's superior Shadow Clone training method and Sharingan clone training method. Or even if he stayed in the Leaf and didn't personally travel, if Sasuke were to dispatch some clones to just wander the world, especially the major nations copying jutsus while having some others work on learning elemental releases back in Konoha, he could easily end up learning Water, Air, and Earth release by the end of the time skip, achieving what took Hiruzen Sarutobi a lifetime to do, and got him so much renown in only a few short years, as Sasuke would then have full mastery of the base 5 natures, and a bunch of jutsu from each, either copied from the strongest practitioners in the world of those elements, or devised or adapted into a format that better suits Sasuke Uchiha and his ambitions, all while still having like 20-ish years worth of training to capitalize on, but still squeezed down into a period of time that's less than 3 years. Speaking of the Sarutobi clan, by the way, from which one of his past ninjas Sasuke was named after, they're another good reason for Sasuke to remain in the village in this timeline, as they are, after all, considered second only to the Uchiha in their mastery of fire style jutsu, and they have a great many techniques like the Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu and the Flying Swallow due to the age and the well-traveled nature of the clan. We know that they know a lot and they're very good teachers. And Sasuke using some higher level Sarutobi techniques, like the Summon Animal Weapon Transformation Augmentation Jutsu, would be extremely sick, with either Garuda, Aoda, or even both with his actual sword if he wanted to get really disgusting and pull off some 3-sword style crossed with Devil Fruit imbued weapon techniques a la One Piece. Overall, I think Sasuke would be more open to Kakashi's training, especially if in this route, he's still the originator of the training method and points out that Sasuke could still benefit from it even to a lesser extent, though he could also use that to his advantage in a way, by remaining in the village to train with the method, that he may have lost out on somewhat by going with the Orochimaru, or even if he did, he could more quickly learn all he wanted to from the Sonic before turning on him faster than in canon. This would also mean Sasuke's training here would be far healthier, and with the support system of Sakura, who if we continue using this as a continuation for her part of this series, will be a far better kunoichi and partner for him to lean on here. And Kakashi, who here would sooner become a peer Sasuke can grow alongside, rather than a mentor he has to feel stifled by, since with both the clones and the Sharingan, he really wouldn't be losing out on all that much by not having Orochimaru as his master during this time. And to that extent, as I said, the Sharingan isn't used to its full potential for training, since Sasuke could arguably make an illusionary version of Orochimaru based off his psychological profile and the experience and information Sasuke has on him to make a fake Orochimaru to coach him in training, meaning even the stuff that Kakashi couldn't teach Sasuke as well as Orochimaru could, like Genjutsu for example, Sasuke could still pick up. And vice versa, Sasuke spending this time with Kakashi developing his Sharingan could lead to even more developments for Kakashi, though we'll say that for the final part focus on Kakashi to really dig into further and really break your brains and the story with how insanely, stupidly, brokenly powerful some of these characters could get by abusing these mechanics. Oh, I'm also not going to spend a ton of time elaborating on it further from here, but when this Sasuke with a better understanding of stuff like ninja basics and how useful chakra control is, along with all the time and effort he can put into his training with his hacks methods, Sasuke could essentially turn all his swordplay and Genjutsu into something akin to the breathing techniques from Demon Slayer, except the elemental effects that are simply visual flourishes in that series would actually be real tangible phenomena here, and Sasuke would be able to get rather good at these things too extremely quickly. Just imagine Sasuke pulling off a Hinokami Kagura for example, or Thunderclap and Flash. Or, for instance, the Leaf Village has a Genjutsu technique used by Hayate Gecko and Yuga Uzuki, called the Dance of the Crescent Moon, which reminds me of Kokushibo's moon breathing, arguing the question of what someone enhanced by chakra in the Sharingan could do with such techniques. Also, speaking of Leaf Genjutsu techniques, are you familiar with my What If Zabuza Survive story? Because if not, let me introduce you to a version of Sasuke possibly using the Helmet Splitter Jutsu, basically a Naruto version of the Getsuga Tensho. And with his mastery and experimentation, Sasuke could push that technique further than it's even pushed in that story, possibly imbuing the Helmet Splitter with all kinds of different elements, for example, like lightning style, infernal style, and probably even his faux ice style. Slash it once with lightning style, see it paralyzed and maybe even critically sliced, slash again with Amaterasu to wipe out what's left, and then slash again with ice release to freeze anything that survives that, so there aren't any regeneration or substitution shenanigans. This is why Sasuke kinda overproves why Shadow Clone training is so broken, because he overtly doesn't need it to get much stronger than he did in canon, since it would enable him to do pretty much everything Orochimaru or even his Mangekyo Awakening were able to do for him, except just pretty much for free. As I said, even if Sasuke can't make a ton of clones, he can use that limitation to allow his clones to take in a greater amount of more complex information than Naruto used his clones for. Meaning, for example, any remaining texts or scrolls left by Sasuke's Uchiha forefathers that remained in village custody would therefore be his to browse over at his leisure, while simultaneously really ingraining the information they all hold. Or he could simply do this regular jutsu, as I've been describing, and again, any technique of the 1,000+ Kakashi is willing to teach him would be at his disposal, along with opportunities to increase his number of chakra releases and how large his chakra reserves are, and then how fine and acute his control of that overall chakra is. For a taste at an even crazier concept of things that could be done with the Sharingan, we've also seen its power implanted in another non-Uchiha before, which in the grand scheme of things is never really explained mechanically, but does propose a lot of interesting implications for its use in stuff like surveillance, support, or assassination, for example. Like, could Sasuke not theoretically utilize that ability alongside his clones for training in combat? Basically, implanting illusionary clones that maintain the data and experience transfer of shadow clones, but don't actually require the use of enough chakra to physically manifest them. Kinda ghost clones, if you will. This concept could especially be done, in my opinion, if Sasuke closely investigated Yamanaka and Leaf Village interrogation abilities and techniques, basically allowing Sasuke to turn enemies and allies alike into likely unknowing carriers of a kind of virus, a mental copy of Sasuke he could dispel whenever he wanted, after allowing that clone to scour the target's mind and spirit for all their valuable knowledge. And the trigger for launching this technique could literally just be a glance from the Sharingan. Theoretically, it's all completely sound, and doing it this way, Sasuke wouldn't need to launch massive amounts of clones to power up and train with. Using only a few on a strong or willing and skilled target would lead to massive amounts of valuable intel, experience, and possible techniques that Sasuke can adapt into its own or the Uchiha style. To more plainly spell it out and again save some more time, since I hopefully don't need to keep hammering home how broken this could be anymore, with the use of Shadow Clone training method, and especially using it with his Sharingan, Sasuke feels like Madara in his own right a lot sooner, and he'd surpass Madara a lot sooner as well. And to be clear, we're still only focusing on nature and form changes in training, which compared to things like sealing and genjutsu aren't as complex a field. That said, we won't go too much further on this one, since it again steps on the toes of another super mini I've already done before. But it really should be considered how things like this kind of training proposed could affect Sasuke when using things like the Susanoo or his pseudo-elemental Kekkei Genkai, since the versatility and craziness of the things he could pull off are why I maintain that this just isn't really great for a narrative story, as there just isn't a lot you could do to challenge him. But now that we're done with our penultimate part focusing on Sasuke, and with it devastatingly clear how Shadow Clone training, even when watered down, can turn anyone into a near god of shinobi, we're going to try this one last time, focusing mostly on Kakashi. However, he won't be all we talk about, so please be sure to stay tuned for that last part. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to support my content, consider joining me on Patreon, become a channel member, or commissioning me for a video like this one. Or you can hit the like, share, and hype buttons for completely free and still help the channel a lot, like these generous souls whose names you see scrolling across the screen currently. Until next time, that'll be all from me, so take care of yourselves and the world around you. Go beyond plus ultra as always, and I'll see you next time. Believe it.